I never thought the first time I'd taste betrayal would be from the woman I was about to marry. The diary slipped from my fingers and landed open on the floor, pages fluttering like a dying bird. I stared down at the ugly truth scrawled in glittery ink, mocking every memory we had built together. Being pursued by this loser is humiliating. The words burned hotter than any slap could. I knelt down slowly, picking it up with shaking hands, flipping through page after page of her teenage cruelty. Every line was a dagger twisting deeper into the trust I had so stupidly given her. She called me pathetic, a charity case, a backup plan if nobody better came along. I sat there for a long time, listening to the hiss of the shower, the water masking the sound of my world shattering into something unrecognizable. In the reflection of the mirror across the room, I caught a glimpse of myself. I didn't look like a man about to propose. I looked like a man about to bury something he could never resurrect. The bathroom door creaked open. Tony emerged, her hair dripping wet, skin glowing, smiling at me like she hadn't just killed whatever hope I had left inside. "What's that?" she asked, eyeing the diary in my lap. I smiled. God, I smiled so perfectly she never suspected a thing. I closed the diary with a soft thud and set it back on the nightstand. "Just an old notebook," I said easily. "Nothing important." She laughed and crossed the room to me, perching herself on my lap, wrapping her arms around my neck like a promise. I kissed her back, tasting the future she thought she had so perfectly planned. Tomorrow, the ring would still slip onto her finger. The party would still roar with applause and fake smiles. She would still beam at me in front of our families and friends. But deep down, I would know. I would know what she truly thought of me. And when the time was right, I would show her just how much of a loser she had really created. When I first met Tony, she wasn't the most beautiful girl in the room. She was the sun around which everyone else orbited, pulling people into her gravity without even trying. And me? I was just one of 100 faces she never noticed, at least not at first. In high school, I was invisible, the kind of guy teachers praised for responsibility and classmates forgot existed the second the bell rang. I carried extra books, stayed late to clean up after events, volunteered for anything that made me useful without making me seen. Tony was the opposite. Homecoming queen before she even officially ran for it. Captain of everything, friends in every hallway. Wherever she walked, the world stepped aside to make room. I wasn't supposed to fall for her. I knew better than that. Girls like Tony didn't end up with guys like me unless it was a prank or a dare. But logic doesn't stop longing. I watched, from afar, telling myself it was enough just to admire her. From a distance, she was flawless. From a distance, she could never hurt me. I don't even remember the first time she said my name. It was probably something small, asking to borrow a pencil, a casual thanks for holding a door open. But once she spoke to me, it was over. I clung to every word she tossed my way like a man drowning. When we started dating, it felt like being chosen by the universe itself. Like all my quiet patience had finally been rewarded. The girl I had once worshipped from across crowded cafeterias was now laughing at my jokes, stealing fries off my plate, linking her pinky with mine under the table. It didn't matter that sometimes she looked through me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. It didn't matter that her smiles sometimes seemed more polished than genuine. I convinced myself that love could fix the cracks. That if I just loved her hard enough, long enough, she would see me the way I saw her. By the time we graduated college, we were inseparable. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. I bought a ring the month after landing my first real job. I spent weeks planning the proposal. Rose petals, fairy lights, a hidden photographer, the whole cliché. Tony said yes without hesitation, tears glistening in her eyes. That night when she fell asleep in my arms, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was the kind of happiness the world owed me after years of loneliness. But now, sitting here with her diary burning a hole in my memory, I realized I had been chasing a ghost, loving an illusion. Tony didn't choose me because she loved me. She chose me because I was convenient, safe, someone to parade around until something better came along. I thought about all the little things I had ignored over the years. The way she never introduced me to her coworkers unless she had to. How she flinched slightly when I talked about long-term plans involving kids or a house. How every compliment she gave me had a faint, metallic aftertaste of obligation. I had seen it all. I just didn't want to believe it. The water from her shower still clung to her skin as she leaned her head on my shoulder, sighing contentedly. I ran my fingers through her damp hair, memorizing the weight of it, the way it smelled faintly of vanilla and rain. "Tomorrow's going to be amazing," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "I can't wait to show everyone how lucky we are." I kissed her forehead. "Me too." She drifted off quickly, trusting me completely, trusting that I would protect her, cherish her, save her from whatever storms life threw her way. And maybe once, that would have been true. But the man who once loved her like she hung the stars had died the moment I read that diary. I slipped out of bed silently, grabbing my jacket from the chair by the door. I stood there for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. There was a time when that sight would have filled me with peace. Now, all it did was remind me of how easily people could lie. I pulled the door shut behind me, leaving her in the dark. Tomorrow we would smile for the cameras. She would wear the ring she thought she had won fairly. And the countdown to the day I took everything from her would begin. After all, if being pursued by a loser was so humiliating, I couldn't wait to show her just how humiliating real regret could be. The next evening, under a string of fairy lights and a sky that looked too perfect to be real, I dropped to one knee and held up the ring Tony had been hinting about for months. The crowd gasped right on cue. A few people even wiped away fake tears, pretending like they hadn't spent the whole ride here gossiping about when I'd finally pull the trigger. Tony brought her hands to her mouth, feigning surprise so well even I almost believed her. Almost. She said yes, of course. She threw her arms around me, whispered how much she loved me, how she couldn't wait to spend the rest of her life by my side. I slid the ring onto her finger, watched the way she twisted her hand under the light so everyone could see just how well she had done for herself. The applause faded. The champagne flowed. The music kicked up a notch. I smiled. I laughed. I let her friends slap me on the back and call me the luckiest man alive. I played my part perfectly, like I hadn't spent the night before, plotting the first moves of a very different future. Tony never left my side, basking in the glow of admiration and envy. She kissed my cheek whenever a camera pointed our way, leaned into me like she couldn't imagine being anywhere else. And maybe, for tonight, she really couldn't. Because tonight, she was still winning. It wasn't until much later, when the party thinned out and the alcohol dulled everyone's edges, that the first crack showed. I had stepped outside to take a call. It was May, Tony's best friend, and someone who had never liked me nearly as much as she pretended to. "I thought you should know," she said, her voice a little too sweet. "Tony's been talking about you all week. How you're perfect. How—" She couldn't have picked better. There was a pause long enough to feel intentional. "But funny thing," May continued. "When she drinks enough, she still calls you by another name sometimes." I gripped the phone tighter, my fingers whitening. "Steven," she said lightly. "Her old boyfriend. The one she cried over for months after he dumped her. You know, the one she said she would have married if he hadn't left town." I could hear the smile in May's voice even without seeing her face. I guess old habits die hard. I hung up without replying, stood there for a long minute, the cold air biting into my skin, washing away whatever haze the party had left behind. Inside, through the wide glass doors, I watched Tony. She was laughing with a group of her friends, the ring on her hand flashing like a warning light. She looked radiant, untouchable, everything I had once thought I needed to be happy. I walked back in slowly. She spotted me instantly, breaking away from the conversation to meet me halfway across the room. "Hey," she said brightly, slipping her arms around my waist. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, matching her brightness perfectly. "Just had to take a call." She kissed my cheek again. Her eyes were glassy from the wine, Her cheeks flushed, her voice just a touch too loud. "I can't believe I'm going to be your wife," she said, laughing like it was the greatest joke the universe had ever told. Neither could I. Later, when we got back to her apartment, she curled against me, drunk and happy and completely unaware that anything had changed. I held her as she fell asleep, the warmth of her body pressing into mine like a promise already broken. I stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathing even out, thinking about the diary tucked neatly back into her drawer, thinking about the name May had whispered like poison through the phone. Stephen. Maybe it was true? Maybe every time she kissed me, she imagined it was him. Maybe every plan she made with me was just her trying to fill a hole someone else had left behind. It didn't matter, because now I wasn't just planning to walk away, was planning to make sure she watched me leave with everything she ever pretended to want, including the love she thought she could fake forever. The days after the proposal moved in slow motion. Every conversation, every shared glance, every casual touch between Tony and me became a heavy reminder of the lies sitting between us. She smiled the same way she always had, kissed me with the same practiced sweetness, and I played along so perfectly, even I started to wonder if I could still feel anything real. But late at night, when the world was quiet and she was curled asleep, beside me, the numbness peeled away and left something sharper, something far uglier. I wasn't sure what hurt more. The diary. May's phone call. The way Tony laughed sometimes when she thought I wasn't paying attention, laughing at nothing at all, and yet somehow it still sounded like a secret I wasn't supposed to hear. Or maybe it was the part of me that had known, had always known, but loved her so much I chose blindness over truth. Most nights I barely slept. I would lie there staring at the cracks in the ceiling, wondering when exactly I had stopped being a person she loved and started being a placeholder she tolerated. The wedding planning started almost immediately. Tony was radiant, throwing herself into every tiny decision with a feverish excitement that looked almost real. Venues, floral arrangements, guest lists. She orchestrated it all with the precision of a general leading a beautiful, meaningless war. Sometimes I caught her staring at her phone for a little too long, typing, deleting, typing again. Every time I walked into the room, she would snap the phone shut quickly, giving me a smile so bright it nearly blinded me. I wondered if it was Stephen she was messaging, if she ever typed out my name by accident and had to delete it, scowling to herself. I wondered if she dreamt about him when she slept against me. I wondered if I was just a long, cruel game she didn't know how to stop playing. Some nights I hated her so fiercely it scared me. Other nights, I hated myself more for still loving her, even knowing she would never look at me the way I used to look at her. And through it all, the plan grew inside me like a dark seed, watered by every fake smile, every feigned kiss, every stupid little wedding favor she held up to show me with stars in her eyes. I didn't want to just leave. I didn't want to just disappear and let her sigh with relief. I wanted her to feel it, to watch the future she built on lies crumble right in front of her, but the timing had to be perfect. No messy scenes, no dramatic fights, no warning. I would let her build the wedding to a fever pitch. I would let her parents spend obscene amounts of money. I would let her walk down that aisle in the dress she dreamed about since she was 16, and then, when the world was watching, when she was standing there thinking she had finally won, I would leave her exactly the way she deserved, alone. The suspense of it gnawed at me every day. It wasn't enough just to know what I was going to do. I had to live with it, wear it, breathe it, pretend every second that nothing was wrong while the truth scorched a hole in my chest. Sometimes I looked at her and almost faltered. Almost. Thought maybe there was something real left between us. Maybe she regretted everything. Maybe the girl in the diary wasn't the woman standing in front of me now, but then she would laugh too brightly at some text she wouldn't show me, or she would turn away just a little too fast when I asked about her plans for the evening. And the walls I had rebuilt around myself would lock back into place, higher and thicker than before. I kept up the charade so well that even May, who watched me with wary suspicion now, couldn't find anything to accuse me of. If Tony noticed my distance, she never mentioned it. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe she thought she had already won. And I was too stupid to notice the way she dangled me on a string. Every day that passed was another step closer to the edge. Every day the air between us grew heavier, thicker, poisoned by words we didn't say. Sometimes I wondered if she felt it too. If deep down, some part of her sensed that she was standing on a trap door. That the world she had built so carefully was resting on rotting wood, or maybe she was just too busy playing her part to notice how fast the floor was crumbling. I couldn't decide which was worse. The suspense twisted tighter around my ribs every day. Every fake kiss, every wedding menu tasting, every stupid Instagram post about how blessed and grateful she was. Soon, very soon, and when the final moment came, there would be no warning, no mercy, only silence, and the sound of everything she thought she had secured slipping right out of her hands. It happened 2 weeks before the wedding. I had gone over to Tony's apartment after work, like I always did, pretending everything between us was exactly how it should be. She greeted me at the door with a bright smile, dragging me inside, talking a mile a minute about flower deliveries and final fittings. She kissed me quickly, lightly, like a formality, and led me to the living room where bridal magazines were spread across the coffee table in a messy flood. I listened. I nodded. I even made comments when she asked for my opinion on table centerpieces like any of it mattered. Like we were building something together instead of digging her grave one detail at a time. While she buzzed around the kitchen, pouring us both glasses of wine, her phone buzzed on the couch next to me. Instinctively, my eyes dropped to the screen. One message preview was enough. Steven, can't stop thinking about you. I stared at it for a long moment, the room tilting slightly even though I hadn't touched a drop of wine yet. Tony's laugh floated from the kitchen, light and easy, as if she wasn't still tethered to a man she claimed to have left behind years ago. She came back in, handing me a glass, unaware that the air between us had shifted so sharply it could have cut skin. I smiled as I took it. Smiled like a man who wasn't slowly dismantling every ounce of affection he had left. We talked. We planned. We joked about seating charts and how her aunt was bound to get drunk and cause a scene. And the whole time, I waited. Waited for her to pick up the phone, to check the message, to react. She didn't. Maybe she thought she could keep both lives running parallel without them ever colliding. Maybe she thought I loved her so much I would never question it. Or maybe she simply didn't care. Later that night, after she fell asleep against me, I slipped the phone from under her pillow. My hands moved automatically now, cold and steady. The conversation was all there. Long, syrupy texts from Steven about what could have been, about what still might be. Her responses careful, cautious, but not the way they should have been if she had truly let go. There was no outright betrayal yet. No confessions, no plans to meet up, but the tone said enough. She wanted the option open, she was keeping him close, and me even closer. I put the phone back exactly where I found it and lay there in the dark, feeling something final snap quietly inside my chest. It wasn't just about her using me anymore. It was about her betraying herself too. She wanted the safety of me, the excitement of him, the future without sacrifice. She wanted everything without ever choosing, and now she would lose everything. Because now it wasn't enough just to leave her. I was going to take him from her too. I was going to make sure that when she reached out for Steven thinking he was her escape, all she would find was a closed door and an empty silence. The plan shifted that night, sharper, darker. No more waiting, no more pretending. It was time to set the real ending into motion. Week of the wedding was a masterpiece of chaos. Tony fluttered from vendor to vendor, checking schedules, fielding calls, making last-minute adjustments, completely oblivious to the crumbling edge she was dancing on. She still smiled at me the same way, still kissed me the same way, still held my hand tightly when her nerves got the better of her, and all the while I was tightening the noose. Steven had been surprisingly easy to reach. A simple message from a burner account, a few strategically dropped screenshots of Tony's messages, and it was enough to light a fuse under a man already drunk on nostalgia. It wasn't hard to make him doubt her. Doubt breeds faster than love. He stopped replying to her after 3 days, stopped liking her posts, stopped answering her late-night calls when she thought I was asleep beside her. Tony noticed. At first, she pretended she didn't, but I saw the cracks start to show, the way she clutched her phone a little tighter, the way her thumb hovered over the screen after sending a message she knew wouldn't get a response. The night before the wedding, we hosted the rehearsal dinner at a private venue downtown. Friends, family, all packed into a room heavy with anticipation and clinking glasses. Tony looked perfect. Hair curled into soft waves, makeup flawless, dress hugging every line like it was made for her alone. She was the picture of a woman about to step into her dream life. Only her eyes kept flicking toward the entrance. Waiting. Hoping. Stephen never came. Neither did any message to explain his absence. I stayed by her side all night, her dutiful fiancée, letting her lean into me for support as the minutes dragged on, and realization crept into her expression like slow-moving poison. When the dinner ended, she gripped my hand a little too tightly as we walked to the car. She was silent on the ride home. I drove slowly through the city streets, savoring the quiet, the slow collapse of the fantasy she had built brick by careful brick. When we got back to her apartment, she didn't get out of the car right away. She stared, out the window, her hand limp in her lap, the diamond on her finger catching the streetlights and throwing them back hollow. "Marcus," she said finally, voice trembling, "do you think people can change?" I turned my head to look at her. In the dim light, she looked smaller than I had ever seen her. "Depends," I said carefully. "Change into what?" She pressed her lips together, shaking her head as if she didn't even know the answer. She faltered, then tried again. "I want to be a better person. For you. For us." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But sympathy doesn't erase betrayal. Sympathy doesn't unwrite ink in a diary or unsend drunken texts. To an old flame, I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender and practiced. "You already are," I lied. Her eyes filled with tears, and she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against mine. "I love you," she whispered. I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me like acid. "I know," I said. That night, she slept curled into my side like a child clinging to a raft in a storm she didn't understand was already drowning her. I didn't sleep. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and cold, the sky heavy with rain that hadn't yet fallen. The venue was a beautiful old church, white stone and ivy climbing the walls like something out of a storybook. Guests began to arrive in elegant waves, the women in dresses that shimmered like soap bubbles, the men in suits stiff with newness. I stood at the altar, perfectly groomed, perfectly composed. Tony hadn't arrived yet. The whispers started soft, growing louder with every passing minute. 15 minutes late. 20. 30. The priest kept checking his watch. My mother shifted uncomfortably in the front pew, shooting me anxious glances I pretended not to see, and then finally, the grand wooden doors creaked open. Tony stood there, framed by the storm-dark sky, bouquet trembling in her hands. She had done her best to cover it, but I could see the panic burning behind her eyes. She walked toward me on unsteady feet, each step the slow unfurling of a life she no longer knew how to hold on to. She reached me, and for a moment, the world held its breath. I took her hands in mine, smiling so gently that even the priest relaxed. Service began. Words blurred past, love, honor, cherish, until it was time for the vows. Tony's voice wavered as she spoke, but she made it through. When it was my turn, I held her gaze. "I vow," I said clearly, "to be truthful to you, as you have been truthful to me." A small, confused furrow formed between her brows. "I vow," I continued, "to give you everything you deserve." The audience shifted, sensing something not quite right, the air growing tight with confusion. "And finally," I said, tightening my hold just slightly, "I vow to set you free." Tony opened her mouth, confused, but I was already pulling away. I turned to the audience, lifting my voice. "For anyone wondering, I found my fiancée's old diary. Read every word she ever wrote about how humiliating it was to be chased by someone like me." Gasps rippled through the church. I turned back to Tony, whose face had gone bloodless. "And then I found the texts," I added softly, "just for her. The ones you sent Stephen." Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The room exploded into noise. Shocked whispers, angry shouts, the scraping of chairs as people stood up in confusion. I handed the priest the ring. "She won't be needing this," I said simply. Then I walked past her, walked down the aisle alone, walked into the rain without an umbrella, without a backward glance. The world roared behind me, friends shouting my name, her parents demanding explanations, Tony crying out something I didn't bother to hear. But none of it touched me. I was already free. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anyone, and no one was using me as a placeholder in their unfinished story. The rain hit my face cold and hard, washing away everything that had ever tied me to her. Ahead of me, the road stretched wide and endless, and for once, it was mine to walk alone. The video of the wedding fallout spread faster than any rumor ever could. Someone in the crowd had filmed the entire thing, from the moment Tony entered the church looking like a princess about to be crowned, to the exact second I exposed her for everyone to see. It hit social media within hours, captions screaming about betrayal, about a groom who walked away without a second glance. Overnight, my name became a rallying cry. Thousands of comments flooded in from strangers who didn't even know me but felt every ounce of satisfaction I couldn't express in that moment. Finally, a man with dignity. "Ultimate revenge. You're a hero, Marcus." She thought she could play forever. He ended the game. Tony disappeared from social media within a day. Friends she once paraded around dropped her like a live wire. Coworkers she boasted about started whispering behind her back. The wedding vendors she hadn't paid in full blasted her name across every blacklist they could find. Even Stephen, the man she kept clinging to in secret, ghosted her completely once the screenshots of their conversation leaked. His fiancée, because yes, he had one too, found the messages. The fallout shattered his life neatly and completely. A part of me had expected Stephen to reach out, maybe to threaten me, maybe to beg. But he stayed silent. Cowards usually do. Tony tried to call me once. I watched the phone vibrate until the screen went dark. She tried again, and again. Each time I let it ring out. Each time I felt a little lighter. The final blow came 2 weeks later. An anonymous tip, not from me, but I didn't care enough to correct anyone, reached her company's HR department. Screenshots of her conversations with Stephen while she was supposed to be on the clock, implicating her in time theft, conflicts of interest, professionalism violations. She was fired without ceremony. I heard she tried applying elsewhere, but the stain followed her. No one wants to hire a walking scandal. As for me, the doors she once slammed in my face swung open on their own. Opportunities flooded in. Interviews, sponsorships, collaborations. Everyone wanted to hear from the man who turned heartbreak into a public art form. I didn't just survive. I built something bigger than she could have ever imagined. A consulting company reached out to me after one of my posts about resilience went viral. They offered me a 6-figure position without a second thought. I accepted, but not before negotiating a better title, a better salary, a better everything. Because this time, I wasn't going to settle. I moved into a sleek new apartment, downtown. No roommates, no noise. Just polished floors, massive windows, and a view that stretched across the skyline like a promise. One evening, standing at the balcony with a glass of whiskey in hand, I got a letter. It wasn't from Tony. It was from She didn't apologize, not really. Instead, she congratulated me in a way that felt half sincere, half envious. Told me she always suspected Tony wasn't ready to be a wife, wasn't ready for a man who knew exactly what he was worth. She hinted at wanting to meet up. For drinks. For closure. I set the letter down carefully, and then I set it on fire. I watched, the paper curl and blacken, disintegrating into ash that floated off into the night sky. I didn't need closure from people who thought loyalty was optional. Already had closure. Every time I woke up in the silence of a home I earned myself. Every time I checked my bank account growing stronger. Every time I looked in the mirror and saw a man who refused to stay broken for anyone's amusement. That was closure. Tony tried to write me once more, a real letter this time. No texts, no calls, just her neat, careful handwriting on soft cream paper. She talked about how much she missed me, how she wished she could take back the stupid mistakes she made. How she realized too late that no one had ever loved her like I did. She asked me for one meeting, 1 hour, one coffee, one chance. I didn't respond. I didn't even finish reading the letter. Love isn't enough when respect is gone, and she killed respect. The second she thought it was funny to chase attention from a man who never saw her as anything more than a backup. Somewhere out there, she's probably still wondering when exactly she lost me. Still wondering if there was a moment she could have chosen differently. But there wasn't. She lost me the first time she thought I was a joke. And me? I stopped being the joke. I became the punchline everyone cheers for, the one who got away, the one who made it, the one they'll still be talking about long after the wedding pictures have all been burned. I set my glass down on the balcony rail and watched the city breathe below me. The future was open, endless, waiting, no strings, no lies, no one else's script, just mine. And this time, I was writing it my way.